It was the laughter that cut through him first. Not the winter chill seeping through the stained glass, not the rustle of the congregation's fine clothes. It was the soft, sharp sound of children's giggles, pointing, and the hurried whispers of their parents pulling them closer, all because of an old man's coat. Walter's coat was, to be fair, a sight. It had long ago surrendered its original color to a patchwork of gray and brown, its fabric worn thin at the elbows and cuffs, a button missing near the collar. He sat alone in the back pew of St. Mark's, a quiet island in a sea of Sunday-best wool and crisp scarves, his gnarled hands resting on his knees. Every Sunday for months, he'd come just as the service ended, slipping in during the final hymn. He'd sit for exactly 10 minutes after everyone left, then leave as quietly as he'd come. Sarah, the young mother trying to corral her twin boys, noticed him first. "Don't stare, Liam," she whispered, gently turning her son's head. "It's not polite." But she thought it too. Why doesn't someone get him a new coat? Mr. Henderson, the usher, felt a pang of pity mixed with mild embarrassment. This was a dignified church. He'd often hover near Walter, hoping to offer a bulletin or a greeting, but the old man's downcast eyes were a silent wall. The whispers weren't cruel, not exactly. They were born of discomfort, of a world that had grown accustomed to surfaces. "Maybe he's homeless," someone murmured in the fellowship hall over coffee. "Should we start a coat drive?" another suggested, well-meaning but distant. Walter was a puzzle they tried to solve from afar, defined entirely by that shabby, oversized coat. He lived in a small, immaculate apartment 2 blocks away. The walls were bare except for a single yellowed photograph of a woman with a kind smile, Eleanor. His world had narrowed to the quiet rhythm of survival, the careful counting of coins for groceries, the slow walk to the park, the Sunday visit to the church that still felt like her place. The coat was her last gift to him, bought for their final wedding anniversary 20 winters ago. "It's lined with warmth, Walt," she'd said, her eyes sparkling as he'd pretended to model it. "It'll see you through." Putting it on now was like stepping into a memory, a shell of the love that had once held him so completely. He didn't hear the whispers as judgment, he felt them as a confirmation of his invisibility, a man faded as the coat itself. One bitter Sunday in December, the tension in the air was thicker than the falling snow. The church was adorned with greenery and lights, a celebration of generosity and light. And there, in stark contrast, sat Walter in his threadbare relic. As the final amen echoed, the usual rush for the doors began. A young, well-dressed man named David, feeling a surge of holiday charity, decided to act. He approached Walter, pulling a crisp $50 bill from his wallet. "Sir," David said, his voice loud enough for those nearby to hear, "please let me help you get something warmer for the season." The space around them went quiet. Walter slowly lifted his head. His eyes, a pale, watery blue, met David's not with gratitude, but with a deep, wounded pride. "I have a coat," he said, his voice gravelly but clear. He pulled the old fabric tighter around him, a king clutching his ragged robe. David flushed, retreating with mumbled apologies. The act of intended kindness had only magnified the gulf between them. The following Sunday, Walter didn't come, nor the Sunday after that. A faint collective guilt began to stir within the congregation. Sarah wondered if her hushed scolding of her children had been heard. Mr. Henderson regretted never truly offering a handshake. They had been so busy seeing the coat, they had forgotten to see the man wearing it. Then, on Christmas Eve, as the church glowed with candlelight and echoed with carols, the heavy door creaked open. Walter stood there, a silhouette against the dark, snow dusting his shoulders. He looked frailer. He moved slowly down the aisle, not to his usual back pew, but right to the front, drawing every eye. A ripple of unease moved through the crowd. What was he doing? He stood before the peaceful nativity scene, his back to the congregation. For a long moment he was still. Then, with trembling hands, he began to unbutton the shabby coat. There was a collective, almost indrawn breath.
He slipped it from his shoulders, folding it with a tenderness that was startling, and laid it gently over the hay in the manger, right beside the ceramic figure of the infant Jesus. The gesture was so utterly bizarre, so profoundly out of place, that for a second no one moved. Then Walter turned to leave, shivering slightly in his worn flannel shirt. "Wait!" The voice was Sarah's. She broke from her family and walked forward, not to stop him, but to the manger. Something had fallen from the coat's pocket when he laid it down, a single tri-folded piece of stationery, so soft at the creases it was nearly falling apart. With Walter frozen, watching her, she carefully picked it up. "Please," he whispered, but the word was a plea, not a command. Sarah's eyes scanned the elegant, fading script. She read a line silently, then aloud, her voice catching, amplified in the silent, candlelit space. "My dearest Walt, the doctor says I must write my goodbyes now, while my hands still remember to hold a pen. Do not be sad in this old coat. I lined it with every prayer for your warmth, every memory of our laughter to keep out the chill. When you wear it, feel my arms around you, and when the time comes that you feel alone, lay it down. Give my love away, as I have given all of mine to you. Yours forever, Eleanor." A sob broke the holy silence. It came from Mr. Henderson, whose own wife was battling illness. Sarah's tears fell freely on the paper she held, as if it were sacred parchment. David, who had offered money, felt his throat tighten with a shame far deeper than embarrassment. They had seen a charity case. They had been whispering about a piece of cloth, while he had been carrying a cathedral of love within its threads. Walter stood, exposed, not by his thin shirt, but by the raw love now laid bare for all to see. He wasn't a stubborn old man clinging to rags. He was a widower clinging to a final, tangible embrace, a sacred trust from his wife to finally release her love back into the world. Sarah was the first to move. She didn't hand him his coat back. Instead, she walked to him and wrapped her arms around his thin frame, her own expensive wool coat pressing against his flannel. It was not a hug of pity, but of understanding. One by one, the congregation followed. Mr. Henderson shook Walter's hand, his eyes red. David simply said, "I'm so sorry. Tell me about her." Walter did not return to the back pew. That Christmas Eve, he sat in the front, his coat, now understood as a relic of a great love, draped not just over manger hay, but over all their hearts. The shivering stopped, not from the church's heat, but from a warmth that finally reached him. In the weeks that followed, the story of the letter became a quiet legend, but the true miracle was in the change it wrought. The church didn't just buy Walter a new coat, they built a community around him. He became the keeper of their stories, a living reminder that the most profound treasures are often hidden in plain sight, wrapped in what the world mistakenly calls shabby. He passed away the next spring, peacefully, in his sleep. Folded neatly on the chair beside his bed was the old coat. In its pocket they found a new note in Walter's own shaky handwriting. It read, "I laid it down, I gave her love away, and I found it returned 1,000-fold. Tell them to look past the fabric. The finest threads are woven from kindness." Sometimes the most sacred stories aren't found in books. They are walking among us, hidden in the seams of a worn-out coat, waiting for a heart soft enough to read them. Share this story if it reminded you to look a little deeper.